This is Everybody Pulls the Tarp with your host, Andrew Moses. Each week, Andrew talks with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets.
My guest is Washington Commanders running back Austin Ekeler.
Every day we write a page of our life. The best thing is you have the pen in your hand.
Three-time Olympic gold medalist Tessa Virtue. Welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Thanks for thinking of me, and I'm a big fan of the podcast and of yours. So anytime you text or call, I'm here.
Mike Mills from REM.
The key to that was realizing at some point fairly early on that this was probably our life's work.
Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas.
My guest is 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year, Stephanie White.
The hardest thing for a coach is try to prioritize how much time you put in one area or another.
Former MLB player, coach, and manager Clint Hurdle.
That is the best title of any podcast out there in America, and the content matches up to it. Andrew, you do a fantastic job. I'm a big fan. Keep up the great work.
World-renowned organizing expert Shira Gill.
You can improve your life simply by removing things.
Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people.
Let's go. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. This week, my guest is Lewis Henry Mitchell. Lewis is the creative director of character design for Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit organization behind Sesame Street. Lewis grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and at 6 years old was watching The Ed Sullivan Show when Jim Henson revealed himself as the person behind the Muppet that Lewis was watching on screen. That brief moment inspired Lewis and set him afoot on an incredible journey that would quite literally take him all the way to Sesame Street. By the time Lewis was just 17, he got a job working with Neil Adams, one of the world's top comic book and sequential artists. Lewis would go on to illustrate children's books and work in both character and toy design, and eventually became a character design artist at MTV Animation. From there, after many years of continued outreach and tenacious follow-up, Lewis was hired to do some freelance work at Sesame Workshop. And then in 2000, he was named a full-time member of the team. In his role as creative director of character design, Lewis directs and oversees all aspects of character art for Sesame Workshop. Lewis notably designed Sesame Street's Julia, the first Sesame Street character on the autism spectrum. In addition to his work on Sesame Street, Lewis is also the author of the new book, Qreative Evolution: How to Question Everything to Find Your Creative Fulfillment. The core principle of Lewis's book is his belief that everyone is an artist. Lewis and I were recently introduced by a mutual friend and sat down to record the conversation you are about to hear. We explored his journey and many of the powerful ideas he's learned along the way. My friends, this is an incredibly moving conversation that will inspire you to follow your passions and stick with something, even amidst setbacks. And perhaps most importantly, Lewis's story is a reminder that little moments of inspiration truly have the power to change our trajectory. I know I'll be thinking about my conversation with Lewis for a long time to come, and I hope you take away as much from this one as I have. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Lewis Henry Mitchell. Lewis, where I want to begin, I want to go way back. You grew up in Brooklyn, New York, as you put it, quote, obsessed with drawing, comic books, animation, and puppets, end quote. So I am curious, what is your first memory of art and creativity in your life?
I remember, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old when I saw a movie called Hansel and Gretel. I saw the ad on TV. It was stop motion animation. And I'd seen many different kinds of animation, but when I saw that, for some reason, it caught my attention from a different place in my brain. And I just had to see that movie. And of course, I was afraid of movies. My sisters had taken me to the movies before, and I screamed and had to take me out. But that time, no, I had to see this. And I was scared when we went to the theater, but my fear was subordinated by my desire to understand what is going on. There's something different happening there. So that was it. That was when it really started to click somehow.
And what was it about it? So like you go to see that movie. Does it continue to progress in terms of like how much you were drawn to that moment and that animation and that experience?
Yes, it did. As the movie went on and I saw the different manifestations of the puppets, and I know they're not people because they're different. Because again, I was like 4 or 5 years old, but there was just something that was happening to me. And I'm glad it happened because again, they were puppets. So that was like the beginning of my interest in puppets and other things happening. And so as it progressed, I got so excited about it that I wanted to start making something that was like that. But I didn't know how to even begin. I just didn't knew that I loved it and I wanted to be part of that.
So from that point forward, I mean, how do you dive in? Are you always writing and drawing and creating from that point forward as a kid? Talk about that.
Not always, because again, I was a little confused because again, I didn't expect to be charged like that. Seeing anything, I mean, I'd like things that made me laugh and made me cry or made me get curious, but nothing ever impacted me like that moment when I saw those weird creatures moving around in that funny way. I hadn't seen King Kong or any of the other stop motion films that are very famous now, but I remember that one just caught my attention. And the music too. I think what the real Engelbert Humperdinck wrote Hansel and Gretel, and that music, it was just heart-wrenching. So with the combination of music and the visuals and the designs and all those things just started turning things on for me. Again, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know that was happening to me. All I knew was that there was something happening that caught my complete attention. My entire body was connected to this.
So another profound moment in your life that I recall you writing about in your book is your first time seeing the Muppets. I think you were, if I recall correctly, about 5 or 6 years old. You're watching them on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Jim Henson is revealed as behind the Muppet, and this immediately inspires you, similar to the moments that you just described a few minutes ago. Take me back to that moment. Was it similar? Were there differences? Take me back to that moment, another moment that clearly impacted you so profoundly and set you a foot on this journey.
That was actually the moment because, again, I'm watching Hansel and Gretel and seeing them move around and things like that, but I wasn't really picking up how it might have been done or any of that kind of stuff. So then move forward to I'm 6 years old now. And of course, I had been watching the Ed Sullivan Show for a while. And whenever the Muppets come on and Ed Sullivan says his famous, here come the Muppets with his funny voice, I would do a running slide in front of the TV, and that was my time. So I would just be hooked on the TV. And after the segment, Jim Henson would come out to shake Ed Sullivan's hand, but I really didn't care about him either because who's that guy? But the day came, there was a skit about Kermit playing the piano, and eventually the piano ate him, which, Muppets get. And I loved it. But then when the same man with the beard came out, he still had Kermit on that. Kermit wasn't a frog yet. He was just kind of lizard-like character. But it was definitely Kermit. You could see the basic features were all there. And it just blew my mind. You mean a man was doing that? I was really, really fixated. And that's the difference. When I saw Hansel and Gretel, I just saw some fascinating movement and I saw beautiful music. But when Jim Henson came out, the man behind the magic came out to show what he was doing and who was doing it. That's the difference. That's made a bond with me and I guess Jim Henson. But to make me think, well, maybe I can do that too. And it just set me in a wonder world of wild, investigation, exploration. And one of the things I say in the book is that I even started stealing my sister's socks because they were beautiful, colorful socks. It wasn't my fault. I had to have something colorful to use to build these puppets. And I never told them, never ever. But when they see this interview, well, my sister, my surviving sister, Margarita, she'll see this because she's following everything I'm doing. So she'll know that I was the one that stole the socks. I think I said it in the book too. So
now, after all these years, she'll know where those socks went, and I'm sure she, now knowing all that you accomplished, is so glad that you stole those socks from her dresser drawer. Now, take me back to that period of time again. I mean, you're 6 years old. You have this profound moment, and you just start immersing yourself in all of this right out of the gates. Also, from your book, I know that again, your mother was very, very supportive of you pursuing this path. Your father was not as supportive. Take me back to that kind of experience. How did you process all of that? You have one parent who's really energizing you and supporting you, and then you have another voice in your ear that's saying, this is not necessarily the right path for you.
Yeah. So again, my father, he loved me. He was, he did the best he could because he didn't understand the kinds of things I was doing because he didn't live with us. So he didn't get to see me developing and getting interested in all these different things. So mom was right there all the time. So whenever I did show an interest in anything, my mother would make it available to me, which was really awesome of her because she knew what kind of a nosy kid I was. So she would, like when I was interested in drawing animals, she went ahead and ordered an encyclopedia of animals. And she just left it under one of the tables in the living room. And she knew I was going to eventually find it. So I go in underneath and I open the box without asking permission because I was just curious. What is this? She knew what she was doing. I open it up and I see this 4-volume encyclopedia of animals. And I said, Mom, did you know this was under here? I said, yeah, I bought it for you. I knew you'd find it eventually. Same with my music. I'm jumping around a little bit, but just to let you know, my mom, when I was 16 years old, this girl broke my heart in school, a girl named Valerie. And she broke my heart, and I didn't know what to do, so I didn't want to sleep anymore. So I went to school really early one morning, and the principal saw me there, and he said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I couldn't sleep, so I figured I'd come early and wait for the school to open. You come with me. I thought I was in trouble. He just wanted to give me an opportunity to do some work to stay out of trouble. So I was moving boxes. He gave me the keys after I was finished because I did it as fast as I could to get out of his office. He gave me the keys. They said, go up and shoot some hoops and, before class. And I did it for 3 days. But the fourth day, I walk in, and the third or fourth day, and I'm passing the music room, which was never open before. That day was open, and I felt drawn into it. So I went and started learning that I could play the piano. I mean, little by little, but it grew very quickly. So I asked my mom, can we get a piano? I didn't tell her I was learning how to play. I just said, can we get a piano? Said, well, what do you want a piano for? So one day we're walking down Pitkin Avenue in Brooklyn. She sees that I'm interested in this piano. I said, Mom, can we go into this music store? Why? What do you say? I just want to go and see the pianos. I didn't tell her. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't supposed to tell her because what happened was a miracle for me. So we go in there, and it's a huge place. And, people playing the piano all over the place because you couldn't really notice any one person playing. So I went way in the back, and I found this one piano that felt right. I bonded with it. It's all about bonding. I bonded with the piano, and I'm playing it, and my friend Andre was with me. I'm playing my friend Andre, and I'm playing like Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin, the way I've gotten up to that point. And he said, where'd you learn how to do that, Lou? So I'm teaching myself in school. So I went back and said, Mom, I found a piano that I really want. I said, the one back there. And she said, why do you want it? She just didn't understand. So I said, it's okay, Mom, because she was so good to me. I didn't want to push. I said, it is kind of expensive. So I just go back and play a little bit more. And I left there and feeling like, wow, I wish I could have had that piano. One day I come home from school, and there's the piano in the living room where the couch used to be. It was moved. And I looked like Cookie Monster. My eyes are bulging in my head. I was like a deer in headlights. I couldn't move. And my sister, thank goodness, she took a picture of that moment. And I was standing there, and I didn't understand what I was looking at. So finally I went, and I just put my hands on it and started playing. And my sister said, where'd you learn how to do that? So Mom came. So she found a way to get me that piano, even though she was a single mom. And she found a way to get that piano to me. So she was always investing in me in one way or the other. And after a while, I playing Scott Joplin. I was going through the records one day just because I wanted to see if I could find something to learn from. And I find a box set of Scott Joplin records. Mom, did you know this was here? Yeah, I bought it for you. I knew you would find it eventually. It's Tchaikovsky, all this stuff that we had never had this kind of music in the house before. But she saw that something was happening with me, and she wanted to support it. My father, on the other hand, because he wasn't at the house with us, he would come visit, but he didn't really see what was evolving and developing in me. So he didn't get a chance to really support it. So he knew that artists a lot of times don't really make it. And he figured I ended up being a starving artist. So he was trying to talk me out of it and join the army because he said, yeah, you get free medical benefits for the rest of your life and you'll have this experience. But I didn't want to do that. And my mom knew I didn't want to do that. So she just kept saying, well, don't worry, just keep going. Don't worry. He just doesn't understand. Just keep going. That was her famous phrase, just keep going. And that's what got me through so many different things, even trying to get the job at Sesame Street.
Just keep going. I know from your story how important that phrase and that mindset is. Just keep going. And I'm sure it'll rear its head numerous times throughout our conversation today. I'm curious, as we think, shifting from kind of your story for a moment, just to creativity more broadly, is that just a fundamental pillar of helping people find their creative side? Is that if you see them, an interest spark in them, if you can, to try and feed it a little bit more, if that door cracks open a little bit, kind of kick it open and nudge it open a little bit further, like your mother did so many times for you as a kid. Talk about that.
Well, see, the thing is, again, the basic premise of Qreative Evolution is that everyone is an artist creating their lives, whether they know it or not. So why not intentionally do that so that you can impact the outcome of what's going to happen to you? You can't control your life, but you can creatively influence it and keep it going deliberately in the direction you'd like it to go into. So it doesn't really take a lot from me. I think people see this enthusiasm that I have for life itself, not just for art, but, for life itself. And I just start seeing in them, they'll tell me a few things about, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. So why can't you? And they start, well, either too late or I don't have the funds, whatever the excuse. I said, you know what? That's got nothing to do with it. There's something you've discovered inside of yourself. And, and because that's the connection with us. You're looking at me, maybe even looking up to me. You should be doing that. You should be realizing, we're bonded somewhere. There's a tribe being revealed to you. So that's why you're attracted to me, not because of me, but because there's something already in you that maybe was hidden or buried that was suddenly revealed or turned on for you. And now, so it doesn't take a lot to encourage them at that point to pursue whatever it is that they discovered. It's not about decisions. It's about discovery. And that's what I learned. So just hang out with people, be real, have a good time. And then when they start revealing those items and those creative items in them, I said, you know what? I know I can not talk them into it, but I can kind of coach them into embracing that. Then there's a certain point where you just let go because you don't have to. Once people tap into their creativity, really tap into it without anybody telling them they can't do something, it just has a momentum of its own. It has a life of its own, and it just kind of takes off. So I just look for people, I reveal myself to people, through the book. It's going to be really helpful too. And just let them know, yeah, you know what? I was this little kid from Brooklyn that, all I had was my mom and my 8th grade art teacher that encouraged me, but everybody else was, like hell bent on saying, no, you're going to waste your time. You couldn't be doing it. Even my college professor, my hero teacher, everybody was telling me, you just stay calm. Don't try to get so excited about working for Sesame Street and Jim Henson. Just, try to find goals you can attempt. I mean, you can actually achieve. And I didn't want to listen to that anymore. So thank goodness my mom told me, don't pay attention, just keep going. So now I tell other people in a way that they need to hear. No, don't worry about that. Just keep going. And everybody has their own way. Even my mom, she wanted to be a nurse. And she told her mother, you know what? Because my mother grew up at a time, she was a Puerto Rican woman. And, she was at a time when there was a lot of sexism and racism and things that she had to deal with. I didn't find out any of that stuff until much later in her life. But the thing is that she had to really fight to become a nurse. But she wanted to give up. And her mother said, all right, you can give up. But there are a lot of other people just like you who made it. So there's no reason why you have to give up. But if you want to, go ahead. That's how she needed to hear. Just keep going.
She has a lot of her own experiences where she's had to, as you put it, ignore negative voices. I know she has another saying I remember from the book that I jotted down: naysayers do not get a vote.
Yes.
That is another powerful mantra that you took from your mother that I certainly am going to remember. You just alluded to your 8th grade art teacher. I believe her name is Mrs. Charlotte Landau.
Yes, sir.
What was it about her specifically that helped propel this vision for you as opposed to try and stop it as so many folks did over the years?
Whenever someone found out that I was an artist in the making or trying to become an artist, they would say, oh, you should paint like Picasso or somebody like that. And at the time, I didn't understand Picasso. I didn't like it. I thought he couldn't draw. But I know the ear was where the nose was supposed to be and things like that. But I didn't understand this. I love his work now. Like I can't even describe it. But when I told Mrs. Landau, because she saw my work and she said so many wonderful things about it. Again, I'm like in the 8th grade. And I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having fun and I'm learning and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. So I said, maybe as again, the person that I wanted to share a dream with because she was just so open and kind and encouraging. So I said, Mrs. Landa, I want to be a comic book artist. And I kind of braced myself to hear what people used to say, comic book artist. Forget about that. Picasso, Rembrandt, they started talking about, and yeah, those are great artists, but I just not what I wanted to do. So I said that to her and expecting her to say the same kind of thing. But she said, really, that's very interesting. Why don't you bring in some of your comic books that you like so I can see what you're talking about? And that by itself blew my mind because she showed interest. She didn't question it. She didn't put it down. So I said, oh boy. So you see that comic book back there, right? That was my favorite comic book. When I was 11 years old, I got that. And it's called The Green Lantern and the Green Arrow, number 85. The title was Snowbirds Don't Fly. And he is my favorite artist of all time. He's my favorite comic book artist to this day, So anyhow, I brought that copy in, and she's looking at it. She blew my mind. I swear, I can't tell you how much this meant to me. She said, wow, this person, he draws very, very well. Let me show you something. She went and got a book about Michelangelo's work. And she said, now you see the way this comic book artist draws muscles? He had to study the same thing that Michelangelo studied. It's called anatomy. And she starts talking about muscles. But at a certain point, I'm like zoning out because I'm saying, she's comparing one of those famous artists to a comic book artist. It just elevated comic book art to me.
She made the connection for you.
Yes, she made the connection, and she elevated comic book art to me. So I couldn't believe it. So that is what just locked me in. And I really started to try to study anatomy. I was a little shy because some of the pictures were nude, but that was the way you studied anatomy. And they were all drawings. There were no photographs. It was just drawings from a book because my sister, Margarita, she was actually doing paint by numbers and things like that. When I saw that, and she was getting all this attention, I said, you know what, maybe I can get some of that attention too. So I copied a painting of Emmett Kelly that she did. And when my mother saw it, she said, wow, that's really nice. I said, yeah, I just copied well, her name is Margarita, my sister, but we call her Bridgie because her middle name is Bridget. So her nickname is Bridgie. So I just copied what Bridgie did. Yeah, but she used the numbers. You just drew it with your hand, right? I said, well, yeah. Well, that's very special. It is. I'm telling you, Mom just knew what to say, how to say it, and just grow me into that position where to this day, I still hear her. She passed away in 2017, but I still hear Mom. It seems sometimes even reprimanding me. So she left me a lot of good stuff.
So from a professional standpoint, your artistic career, you would say, began when you were about 17 years old, when you worked for Neil Adams, one of the top comic book and sequential artists in the world at the time. Was that really what you would consider your first professional work?
Yes, absolutely.
And what do you remember most about those early days when it shifted from craft and hobby to professional, a job, for lack of a better term?
Well, when I did meet Neil Adams, it was through a man named Howard Chaykin. He was the guy that did the first Star Wars comic books, and I was his assistant. So he invited me to go to the First Friday party, which is every month, the first Friday of every month. The comic book artists in New York City who might be around and available would go to somebody's house just to have a good time and hang out. And so Howard said, hey, Louis, we're going to have a First Friday party. Would you like to come? I didn't know. I had never heard of it before. He told me about it. I said, yeah, I'd love to go to meet all these other comic book artists. This one's going to be at Neil Adams' house. And that I wasn't expecting. I had met Neil at comic book conventions and everything, but not as an aspiring professional. So, we went to the house, and there he was. And Howard told me, you make sure you bring your sketch pads. I want Neil to see what you can do. So I brought my sketch pads and, handed to, because Howard was late. So I'm sitting there by myself. So when he finally came in, I felt a breath of fresh air and relief. He said, Louis, first he ordered a drink. And he said, now, Louis, where's your sketch pads? He grabbed them. And I remember that day he had on these brand new boots, and he really loved them. But he was kneeling down in front of Neil, and he was like kind of scuffing up his boots because he was so excited about what I had done, and he wanted to show Neil Adams. So Neil's looking at everything. He looked at all three of my sketchbooks, forwards and backwards. And he kept looking at me every now and then and he said, I've been sitting on a series of scripts that I couldn't find anybody who I thought could do them, but I think you can do this. Why don't you come up to Continuity? And I'll get you, Continuity Associates was his company. Why don't you come up to Continuity? I'll get you started on the project. And again, I said, okay, thank you. I have to leave because I'm 17 and I didn't know what I was bursting. And I was scared and excited. I was feeling every feeling you could possibly think. Fear and, I mean, nothing like hatred or anything like that, but I was so scared. I said, Neil Adams hired me just by looking at my sketchbooks, and I'm screaming that down 48th Street in Madison Avenue, New York City. But it taught me that even though I had still been working, I didn't have any like finished comic book pages or anything like that, but I did have a lot of drawing. I had a couple of panels in there, here and there. I remember a drawing of Chewbacca from Star Wars, very detailed, one of the most detailed drawings I ever did. I remember he stopped at that one. So the thing is, I saw that maybe I am ready. I didn't think I was ready, but if my hero saw that in my sketchbooks and he hired me just from that, I'm saying, my goodness, maybe I am ready. So that was the threshold. Having not just approval from Neil Adams, not just him liking my work, but to actually hire me on the spot, and I was going to go to his studio the next morning, that just blew me away. So that was the transition from fan to professional in like 15 minutes of time when he was looking at that.
There are so many, as I just begin to reflect on the conversation that we've already had, Louis, there's just so many examples already that you've shared of where people in your life gave you a little bit of confirmation that the path you were on was the right path. You know, you talked about so many of the examples with your mother. You talked about your 8th grade teacher. You talked about this moment, that this 15-minute kind of window that in many ways really changed your life forever. And I'm sure there are so many more. It's just such a powerful reminder. And I think something that we want to put a pin in, right? That we all have these moments where we can do that for others, right? And that is just, and when you have that moment to give someone else confirmation that they're on the right path or nudge them in the right direction, it's an opportunity that we should always take, because it literally has the power to change someone's life. And I think, and conversely, if you're the one on the path, make sure your eyes are peeled and your ears are open and you're looking for those moments when people, even if it's subtle, are giving you confirmation and giving you that nudge that you are headed in the right direction. I just think there's so many powerful examples of that in your story that we've already uncovered, Louis.
Oh, yes. I can tell you, though, the most powerful one of all was when Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday was going to become a holiday. I said I wanted to use my artwork somehow to celebrate that, because he was everything to me. You know, I have the 5 mentors or the 6 mentors that I really appreciate on my desk at Sesame Workshop. And Dr. King is the very first one. You know, Norman Rockwell, Jim Henson, Leonard Bernstein, Leonardo da Vinci. And of course, me when I was 6 years old, that's the greatest mentor of all. I always remember that kid. I have a picture of him on my desk. But when I heard about Dr. King's birthday becoming a holiday, I said, you know, I really want to participate in that somehow. So I developed 2 little booklets and 3 posters that I illustrated. You know, I did portraits of Dr. King. I found these pictures that I liked, but they were really, really badly bleached out or whatever. And I said, I can take several pictures. I really studied hard, really tried to make myself the best artist that I could be. So I found other photographs that I was able to take the one that I liked that was already bleached out, use these other photographs to build up the image and make a very unique, one-of-a-kind portrait that no one had ever seen before of Dr. King. I did that 3 different times. So when I showed it to my boss's boss at McCaffrey McCall Advertising, where I was an art director, and he says, wow, these are really, really good. I said, I want you to go to Atlanta and show these to the Dr. King people. I said, wait a minute, I didn't know that he was going to like it to that degree. So I said, okay. So I prepared everything. They got me tickets and everything, the flight. I didn't stay at the hotel. It was just a 1-day trip. So I went there, and of course I went to Dr. King's childhood home, which was kind of a museum. Then I went to the Dr. King Center, which was right around the corner, and I saw, his crypt, and I saw, went to the store, and they had like a whole bunch of different, his Nobel Peace Prize. It was just so inspiring. I said, boy, this is really an amazing moment of mine to be right here near. I went to the Ebenezer Baptist Church where he used to preach, and I stood in front of it, just thinking that, he walked through these doors several times.
All right, everyone, we'll get back to the conversation momentarily. But first, I want to tell you about my free weekly email newsletter, Tarp Pullers. Each week, I share an uplifting and inspirational tarp pulling story that is sure to brighten your day. And I also highlight some of the most powerful ideas I've learned on my journey talking to 200 and counting of the world's top performers. The newsletter is short, concise, and a reader recently told me this. She said it makes her day every time it hits her inbox. Go to everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter to sign up today.
So anyhow, I went to the offices, which again was on the premises there. And a young lady came out and I showed her the work. And so this is really wonderful. And you go and get someone else to show you. So Dr. King's sister, I forgot her name now, but his sister came out. That was, oh my goodness, this is his sister. She looks at it and says, oh my goodness, this is beautiful work. Qreative has to see this. And so, oh yes, meaning Mrs. King. So I said, yeah, please, you can take all the materials and show her. No, you have to show her. Wait a minute. I didn't see that coming.
Wow.
Gracious, I didn't see that coming. So I said, oh, okay. And I was getting scared. I was getting nervous. So she said, just wait here. She came back and said, now, Mrs. King's not feeling too well. Can you keep your presentation to 2 minutes? I said, I keep it to 1 minute because I said, I don't believe this is happening. I got to do it and get out of there. I said, all right, well, come with me. So she's walking me, and I thought she was going to sit me down in another room. And we turned the corner, and there's Qreative King sitting right there, looking beautiful, but at the same time, you can tell she was under the weather. So she says, well, what do you have for me, young man? With a real attitude. I understand why. What did I do? I said graceful things about how much she and her husband had done for us and how excited I was to show her. And then I laid everything out for her, explained it all in a minute. I said, so please, you can keep the materials and review them. And then let me know, my contact information is included. Let me know if you feel that this is something that you're interested in. And I was getting up. No, sit down, young man. I want to hear more about you. And okay, so I told her more about me, what I did, at the company. And it was really amazing. It was really wonderful to spend time with her like that. But I said, what am I doing here? This is Qreative King. So anyhow, she got back into her attitude. All right, young man, how much is this going to cost me? I said, oh, Mrs. King, you don't understand. The agency that I work for, we're going to pay for all the printing and distribution. We just need your blessings on it. She said, you mean you came here just to ask for my blessings? I said, well, with everything you and your husband already did for us, we owe you so much we'll never be able to pay back. So this is just an opportunity to do something for his holiday. She turned to her assistant and said, you make sure this young man gets anything he needs. And the assistant was smiling and she ran out. But that's when I got the greatest of all the validations. Look, Neil Adams, that was amazing. That was wonderful. But Martin Luther King Jr. represented something else to me as an African-American and as somebody that my mother, when he was killed, my mother started crying. I never saw my mother cry, but she was crying because we were watching the announcement when it happened. And I said, Mom, why are you crying? Who's that guy? And she tried to explain to me, but I was 8 years old at the time. So anyhow, the young lady ran out and I was alone with Mrs. King. And she's looking at my drawings and she says, you know something, young man? I get kind of choked up every time I tell the story, each and every time. She looked at me in my eyes and said, these are the greatest drawings of my husband I've ever seen. And she went back looking down. I was about to explode. If it came from anyone else on her team, that would have been great. But to hear from her looking me right in my eyes, unbelievable. So that, again, was one of the most, if not the most phenomenal of all of the validations I ever got. And you know what? It still wasn't enough because as an artist, as a creative person, we're so very sensitive and we keep moving and always needing more and more validation. But that one, I always remember, and it really does help me at least say, all right, let me just keep going. Let me, like Mom said, just keep going because you're getting all this validation. So that's why, whenever I get a chance to, encourage somebody, especially little kids, I make sure to tell them things. I've gotten in trouble too because I've told kids in front of their parents, now, don't let anybody tell you that you're not an artist. You go for it. Whatever it is you discover inside of you, you go for it. And, well, we want him to be or her to be a doctor or something like that. I said, well, if that's revealed to them, sure, that'd be great. But if it's not revealed, you got to watch and see what is being revealed so you can support that. Now, of course, they're a little off put by that, but they do come around. I don't think I've ever said that to anyone that seemed like a sustained being insulted for any length of time. At first, yeah, but it goes away because they do want to hear from somebody who was like them and who's growing up and who actually fulfilled their dreams and actually surpassed. There's so many things that are going on now that even the book, Qreative Evolution, never thought I'd be a published author. But you just got to keep going. Just keep going.
Just keep going. Louis, I am so glad that you shared that story. First, about the impact that Martin Luther King Jr. had on your life, and then that incredible moment. And I could just see here the emotion. You talked about getting a little choked up every time you tell that story. I could see it. I could feel it as you were telling me that story. And what an incredible story. What an incredible moment. Getting back to the idea of just keep going, I want to start digging into how you got to Sesame Workshop. And just keep going was, as I see it, was like the theme for you breaking into the role at Sesame Workshop. It took some time, if I recall correctly, when you talk about it in the book. You eventually did get some freelance work, but it took a ton of persistence, a ton of outreach. Talk about that. I mean, that's something that so many of us experience as well. You get the door slammed in your face and you have to reset, and you get the door slammed in your face again. So many people can relate to that. Talk about that period of time leading up to that breakthrough where you got that freelance work at Sesame Workshop and then ultimately the full-time role.
Absolutely. So there's one thing about this that's a little bit different. Now, I did have the door slammed in my face a few times, but in this case, it wasn't like that. When I brought my portfolio to them, they would say, "Oh, this work is wonderful. We don't have any work for you right now, but your work is wonderful." That's almost worse because, they like my work? If this door is slammed in my face, all right, they don't want me. But if they're telling me that they love my work, it's beautiful, and they even describe me in detail, we have no work for you, but we think your work is great. That's kind of harder. So but it did make me keep going. So I kept going. And at first I would send, like the first maybe 3 months, I would send monthly because I would always do a new piece of artwork of the Muppets to show that I'm growing and I'm working on it. And then later on, I started going like every couple of weeks. Then I started going weekly because I said, something's got to give. And I remember that last day when I went in, I said, if I don't get something this time, a real positive, yes, we love your work, and here's an assignment, I said I was going to give up. So I brought it in, left it on the desk, and my friend Jennifer Lupinacci, she was so encouraging. She kept saying, "Louis, I had to find out who to give this portfolio to. I know somebody's going to love it." Yeah, so far everybody loves it, but I'm not getting any work out of it. And that last day, I really meant this. My father kept talking about the Army. Not that I was going to join the Army, but I got to find something else because I'm breaking my own heart, constantly going because I feel like I'm right there. But every time I'm right there, it's like it falls back because they don't have any work for me. So I dropped it off and I said, "Jennifer, if I don't hear something positive this time, I'm not even going to come back for this portfolio." She tried to talk me out of it, but I had made up my mind. So I left and I forgot what I did, but I eventually got home. And that's when I saw I remember back when they had cassettes in the answering machines and there was a little red light blinking, let you know you got a message. So I said, "I wonder if that's from Jim Henson Company." I said, "Probably not." So when I turned it on, a man named Jim Mahan, he was the art director for both Sesame Street and the Jim Henson Company. And he said, very soft voice, but he said the most powerful things when he was talking on that answering machine. I'm like, "Louis, my name is Jim Mahan, and I've been hearing your name around for a while, but I hadn't actually seen the work, but I saw the work today, and I think it's phenomenal. I'd like it if you come up and I'd get you started on a project." Very similar to what Neil Adams told me. He said, "I'd like to get you started on a project if you have time to come up and meet with me."
And you're like, "If I have time, I'm coming."
The thing is, I couldn't even think that far yet because, first of all, it was an actual opportunity. And I listened to that tape till I wore it out and it broke. Not that day, but I just kept listening. So the next morning I went back, even though I had the meeting, I go back home and I listen to that tape, and I planned on keeping that tape forever. And of course it broke in a matter of a couple of days. But the thing is that I met with him and he said, "Yeah, you have a lot to learn about drawing the Muppets, but you draw very well." And he gave me my first assignment, which was a black and white drawing of Ernie, just his head, on the side of a sneaker for a toddler. So it was a teeny little, I had to draw it at a decent size and they would reduce it later on. But to me, that was the biggest job in the world. I made it to Sesame Street, at least as a freelance artist. I said, I'm going to make the most of this. Now that I have the opportunity, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to wrap my life around it. And not knowing that as time went on, I would become the #1 licensing artist and that they were going to ask me to come on full time. I didn't see that coming either. But it was really extraordinary how sticking with it. Again, it wasn't easy. If they said something like, well, your work is fair, we really don't have anything for you. You might want to work on some more of it, but they didn't say, they kept saying, wow, your work is wonderful. We love it. That was what kept me motivated. I have to be honest with you. In my own heart of hearts, if they didn't say something that positive, I probably wouldn't have. Maybe 2 or 3 more times I would have tried, but if they kept saying it's not up to par, and it really wasn't up to par. It wasn't. I had to learn a lot. It took me 6 months to learn how to draw Big Bird without having to get corrections on it. But it was Jim Mahan, that visionary, that saw past my inability to draw the Muppets, because there are a lot of rules in drawing the Muppets. There's not rules per se, but like there's construction and there are proportions and things that you have to take into consideration. At first, it almost seems like math. After a while, it becomes second nature to you. But at the beginning, it's a lot. So I did the best I could. And he kept on, he would lick his lip, take a piece of tracing paper back in the day. Photoshop wasn't that big a deal yet. And he would, with a blue pencil, show me where I made my mistakes. I'd go bring it back home, bring it back to him. He'd look at it. It's nice. Maybe just one minute. He'd give me a little bit more, just maybe 2 rounds of adjustment. But after a while, I just kept getting better and better because I kept practicing. He gave me the materials to study with. And I was drawing, there was a Sesame Street dictionary, which is kind of like our Bible in a way, because this Joe Matthew was like the Muppet illustrator that Jim Henson handpicked to be the one to establish them in 2 dimensions. So he did that dictionary. So all the artists would copy out of that dictionary. But yeah, it was really amazing to finally get to the point where he liked my work. He said, this is great. You don't need any more adjustments. I said, really? And he said, well, if you really want me. He said, no. If I don't need it, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it took a while to get there, but I did get there. And I still practice and study. I don't take it for granted. I still, every now and then, I just start drawing the characters, spontaneously, especially at Chinese restaurants where they have that nice paper on the table.
Yes. The paper on the tables at the Chinese restaurants. So you became a full-time member of Sesame Workshop in 2000. Today, as I mentioned, you are the creative director of character design for Sesame Workshop. You notably designed the character Julia, the first Sesame Street character on the autism spectrum. You had first designed Julia for an autism outreach book. Then you expanded the design and art directed the Jim Henson Company in building the actual Muppet. I want to just dig into how you work today. I'm sitting here just trying to understand, okay, what does it look like when Louis is creating? When Louis is coming up with ideas, when Louis is shaping ideas? Talk about that for a little bit. Like, what does it look like? Paint the scene when you're creating.
That's a beautiful question. And I don't think anyone has ever asked me like that anyway. What does it look like? Well, it depends on what it is, because every project is brand new. Everything is a launch pad. Everything is, a fresh start. So I kind of listen to that creative muse inside. I didn't always know to do that. But when I get an assignment, I kind of see, well, where do I want to be when I start working on this? So what do I need to do to start working on this? Because a lot of times I'll be here at my studio and I'll, if I get an assignment to design a character, or whatever the case may be, I might think for a minute, it's all right, let me get some more information about the character. I'll read up, especially if they have a brief or something like that, because I can talk about what character design really is, because most people don't really know what it is. But so I went in, I would maybe start a couple of sketches after I read the brief or whatever. Or I might go out to take a walk somewhere, go to the park. I might go to Starbucks. I remember there was a series of characters I had to design, and I needed a little bit of chaos in me to be able to do that. So I went to a Starbucks that I know was particularly busy. And, in New York City, people don't usually bother you. They just see sketching or they see you talking to yourself. Nobody cares. But in this particular case, I went to a Starbucks in Times Square, which, of course, that's going to be
chaos.
Yeah, exactly. But it was perfect. And I was designing these really weird looking characters, and the energy was just perfect. So it all depends on what kind of a project it is. And if it's a writing project, a lot of times I'll put my headphones on and, crank up some instrumental soundtrack music. That's like my favorite music to work to, and really dynamic stuff. Or if it's something that I have to do with a very, very sensitive material, I might put something on that's going to support that. It all depends on what I need to eat, basically. So I'm eating with my ears. I'm eating with my eyes, depending on what I need. So it all depends. There's no formulas. There's no one way to do anything like that for me. I know a lot of people, they have their set thing. They might boot something up to the computer. I never, ever start on the computer. Never. It's a beautiful tool. It's a wonderful piece of equipment that I love. I have the state-of-the-art, Mac at home, at work as well, at Sesame Workshop. But I don't even boot it up. I check my email. But when I'm working on a project, I don't even touch any electronics. I want to be as raw as possible. We're ancient beings. We were painting on caves. We were carving and sculpting. We were doing things that still inside of us. And whenever we tap into that, we're tapping into a whole legacy of wisdom and knowledge and understanding that we can still flow with. And the minute you start starting with a computer, you're kind of cutting that off because the computer needs you to operate in a certain way for it to function. And I'll use that later on. To me, that's like a finishing tool. But at the beginning, no. Every now and then, depending on what the situation is, I might take some charcoal. I don't work with charcoal a lot because it's very messy and it doesn't stay on the paper that well. I mean, you have to spray it or whatever you have to do. But I'll go back and I'll even burn twigs and write and sketch on paper with that. Well, I learned that when I was going to college, the School of Visual Arts. One of my teachers, they demonstrated that. Oh, wow, I love that. So, and the thing is, there's something about the smell of the fire, the touch of the bark on the twig that I was using. But there's something happened. I didn't understand it at the time. It wasn't until later on that I started to really study, human nature and, psychology and things like that to understand that because we are ancient beings, we can tap into a part of us that goes back centuries. And that's a power that forget about the hard drives and things like that, centuries and centuries of DNA that we can actually tap into when we're creating our work. So that's what I like to do. That's why, at work at Sesame, I have my computer and my beautiful Cintiq. It's that beautiful tablet you can draw right on. It's a nice, big, state-of-the-art version of it. I spend 95% of my time on the other side of my area, which is a nice, big area. There's my drawing table, my pencil sharpener, remember those? Or my electric, not my electric, but my mechanical pencils. They have a little teeny sharpener back. I use all the materials that bring me back to that ancient being that I am because of my ancestors and because of the whole planet Earth has ancestors back then. We relate more to each other in an organic way than a technical way. And I know that when I start my work that way, that spirit of that organic flow, that ancient value, that ancient substance is going to come through the artwork. And if I'm looking at a toy, say, right, and I'm going to sketch the toy, or we don't actually design the toys, but we get other people's designs from different licensees. And right now it's on Photoshop, where we put a layer on top, but I still draw some people have templates that they put on top of the image of the artwork. But I'm not going to ever use a template. If I'm going to use a computer, I'm going to draw it by hand to show where the adjustments have to be done. So that's the whole thing. There's just no way to pinpoint. Like some people ask me, so what's a typical day like for you? And I say, sorry, can't answer that question. There is no such thing. And I keep it that way. Not that I force it, but I'll go into the office, right? Usually I see a piano back there. Like in the morning, I like to spend very early in the morning, put my headphones on and just improvise or play, see if there's something new that might want to come up. Well, there's a studio at Sesame Workshop as well. So before I get there very early, I have to be there until about 9:30. I'm there at sometimes 7 o'clock. I have special permission to get in extra early if I need to. I might get there at 5 o'clock. And, I never go right to work because I can't call it work. But I'll go into the studio now, kind of improvise. I'll come out and I'll do my practice drawing because I practice virtually every day, unless there's something really pressing going on or if I have to travel. But for the most part, I love to draw. And that's part of my practice, part of my routine. I hate to use the word routine because, it's always something different. I'm always challenging myself. I'm learning different things on the piano. I play a lot of my own pieces, but I'll learn something that I've never learned before. I'll listen and say, let me see if I can learn that in a different key so that I can really, struggle with it. Struggle is a vital part. Frustration and struggle. That's where we start to become more human. And that's why, we can get into AI and things like that later on, but if you want to. But we need to be challenged and to struggle a bit, because on the other side of that is triumph. The other side of that is victory. That's the stuff that sometimes I see where people say, you don't learn anything from success. Yeah, you do. You learn how to do something right. Now, people like to talk about, you learn everything from failure. I didn't even believe in failure. Miles Davis, the trumpeter, he said, don't fear mistakes. There aren't any. There's always a way to use that, to learn how to take that and tap into something else. There's always a way to do that. So to me, it's never failure. It's all practice till I get it right or till I realize I need to move to something else. But I don't, because failure is a negative word. Failure is what I call an alarm word. We hear failure, also your heart can, you get tense. So I try to stay away from those alarm words. I hear them all the time, so I'm not going to provide them for myself. So there's no such thing as a typical day. And, every day is different depending on what I have to do. So that's a long answer to your question.
You answered the question so beautifully. You gave me so many great visuals that I can kind of close my eyes and just see how you're doing this. And again, like you said, there's not really a routine, because routine implies that it's kind of the same thing cyclically over and over. And you've got some kind of key principles that you stand by, but there's an organic nature to it as well. I am curious, Louis, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation today, you have accomplished so much throughout your career. Is there an area that you look at and say, this is still the biggest area of growth for me professionally, even with everything that I've accomplished? What's the biggest area of growth for you professionally today?
Well, that's a very, very deep question. And I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out, but every single day, I really do count every day as a gift. It really is a gift. And I want to learn, how can I, not even thinking about continuing, how can I evolve? Evolution, it means something brand new that never existed before. That's every day. This day never existed before, and it will never exist again. So how do I make the most of this? How do I create my life and use this to make this a work of art? Creative evolution is genuine. There's no theories in there. Everything came out of my life. Every life lesson that I share in there came out of, and some of them, are difficult. I've had to face some very difficult things, but that's part of the human condition, and I want that. So it really is not so much because I am a professional, but because being an artist for me is so organic and so even spiritual that I try to always remain a child. That's the thing, is to always stay that 6-year-old Louis. That's still me. I look a little bit different now. Not too much, I'm kidding. But the thing is, ultimately, I want to remember that. That's my main mentor. Of all the other great mentors, Jim Henson, Jim Henson and Norman Rockwell and Leonardo da Vinci and Dr. King and all these great men that have accomplished so many things. My greatest mentor is Louis Henry Mitchell at 6 years old, because that's when whatever it was turned on. I can't even describe it, explain it. And that's a good thing, because we can't explain everything about ourselves. We can't explain why we love certain things or why we grow in certain ways. We don't need explanations. It's the definition and the explanations is in the heart that's been revealed. So again, it's taking every single day and making it a work of art. Making my life a work of art. So again, I hope this is not like a cop-out, but I don't ever try to stop at any particular project or I'm waiting to learn how to do something brand new. Always want to remain that child, that have that childlike faith, to want to explore everything. That's why I love Elmo. Elmo's all about E stands for enthusiasm too. He'll reach out. He wants to learn everything, about everybody. You can't always do that, but you can do a lot. And why not embrace that? Why not let that be what I call creative gravity, being pulled in a specific direction because you're following your heart. When people ask me, how do you get to Sesame Street? And they usually sing it. Can you tell me? They do that. And I say, yeah, I can tell you I got to Sesame Street. I followed my heart. In spite of all the things that people told me that I was not able to do, following my heart, and I just kept going, like my mom said. And that's what it was. You follow your heart. Don't just keep going. Keep going where your heart's bringing you. That creative gravity that everybody has, their own creative gravity. Something that is in your heart. Maybe somebody talked you out of it, or maybe you yourself are talking yourself out of it. There's something in you that's pulling you. So that's every day. I want to just explore that brand new day that has never existed before and make the most of it. I'm not a maniac. I'm going to take a rest. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to have fun anyway. But the thing about this, I love this life. And I learned what loving life means. Loving life doesn't mean enjoy it to the max. Loving life means to love it as if it was your child. Protect it. If you've got your garden, weed the garden. Weeding means all the naysayers, right? Take all those weeds out. Loving your life means to actively love it, protect it, enjoy it, educate yourself, about whatever it is, whether it's your health or your creativity or work, whatever it is, embrace that and love your life as if it was like a child, like I said.
Louis, moments ago, you were worried about your answer being a cop-out, and you answered that question in a way that's more beautiful than I could have ever imagined.
Wow.
So much wisdom in what you've shared, both in your response to the last question I asked you, but in our entire conversation. I have learned so much from you. I'm going to walk away from this conversation so inspired and motivated and energized, and I know everyone listening will do the same. Louis Henry Mitchell, there is no question in my mind, you are a tarp puller, certified member of the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family.
Woo!
I am so grateful that we got to have this conversation. We'll have to do a part 2 again sometime, but thank you for spending a little bit of time with me this week, all right?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you, Louis. Keep pulling the tarp, all right? We'll talk again soon. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Until next time, keep pulling the tarp.